Not all monsters lurk in the shadows. Some wrap themselves in warmth, care, and unconditional love. But what if that love is the most dangerous prison of all? Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist, coined the haunting archetype known as the Devouring Mother, a figure whose love, rather than nurturing, consumes and confines her child psychologically. This is not a tale of overt abuse or neglect. Rather, it is a subtle, invisible force, a love so overwhelming that it stifles growth, independence, and identity. In this video, we will delve into the unsettling world of the Devouring Mother, a force both intimate and deeply psychological. Beneath the surface of tender affection lies a silent danger, a hidden truth many overlook. Love twisted into control, care weaponized into guilt, and dependency transformed into invisible chains. Why does this matter today? Because countless adults struggle with emotional paralysis, fractured relationships, and a fragile sense of self, all rooted in early maternal bonds that should have been safe havens, but instead became psychological prisons. This archetype sheds light on how the very source of life and love can become the origin of inner turmoil and identity crises. Join me as we uncover Jung's brutal insight into this archetype, explore its profound impact on the psyche, and reveal a path toward breaking free from its grasp. What lies beneath the loving smile? And how can recognizing this shadow help reclaim autonomy and emotional freedom? The answers await. The Devouring Mother archetype explained. In Jungian psychology, the Devouring Mother archetype is not a figure of overt cruelty, but rather one whose love is so intense and overwhelming that it consumes the child's emerging sense of self. Unlike a nurturing mother who fosters independence, the Devouring Mother's care becomes a force that smothers and entraps. Her love is paradoxical. It promises protection and warmth, but ultimately constricts, leaving the child imprisoned within emotional dependence. This archetype typically unfolds as a progression. In the early stages, the mother's care is genuine and protective. She shields the child from harm and nurtures growth. However, as the child begins to assert individuality and seek autonomy, the Devouring Mother's love shifts. Protection tightens into control. Encouragement turns into monitoring and micromanaging. What once was a secure harbor becomes a tightening noose, with emotional dependence growing heavier. The child, instead of blossoming into an independent self, becomes tethered to the mother's overwhelming presence. Healthy maternal love supports boundaries and fosters growth, like sunlight that nourishes a plant, yet allows it to reach outward freely. In stark contrast, the Devouring Mother's love transforms into a cage, her warmth becoming an oppressive blanket that stifles rather than comforts. This love is a double-edged sword. It feels essential and life-giving, but simultaneously restricts freedom and self-expression. Psychologically, this dynamic often hinges on emotional ownership. The Devouring Mother may use guilt trips and conditional love, cloaked in the guise of devotion, to maintain control. The child learns to equate affection with compliance, feeling compelled to sacrifice personal desires to avoid withdrawal of love. This emotional bondage acts like invisible chains, binding the child to a psychological prison without bars or locks. Vividly, imagine a rosebud wrapped tightly in layers of protective silk, too tightly to ever bloom fully. Or envision a siren's call, seductive and irresistible, drawing the child ever closer while slowly draining their will. Across cultures and time, this archetype appears universally in myths and fairy tales, embodied in figures such as the witch, the dragon, or the siren, each symbolizing the peril of love that consumes rather than frees. Even in everyday relationships, the shadow of the devouring mother lingers, reminding us that love, when wielded as possession, can suffocate the soul. How the devouring mother affects emotional development. The devouring mother archetype profoundly impacts a child's emotional growth, particularly sons, by arresting their psychological development and blurring the boundaries between love and control. Sons raised under the influence of a devouring mother often experience a failure to individuate, a concept from Carl Jung referring to the essential psychological process of separating one's identity from that of the mother. This separation, necessary for healthy emotional maturity, is stunted, leaving the son emotionally tethered to the mother's needs and expectations. The devouring mother's overwhelming involvement creates an environment where the son learns to equate love with obedience and control. Rather than experiencing love as unconditional support, he comes to associate it with compliance and submission. This dynamic conditions him to become a people-pleaser, eager to avoid conflict at all costs, as any expression of autonomy is perceived as a threat to the maternal bond. The son's growing awareness of his own desires and individuality is met with subtle or overt resistance, fostering fear of responsibility and hesitation to assert himself. Emotionally, this arrested development manifests as indecisiveness and chronic self-doubt. Sons caught in this dynamic often feel guilty about their need for independence, as if pursuing autonomy betrays their mother's love. This guilt can lead to internalized anxiety, leaving them perpetually uncertain about their choices and fearful of disappointing others. As adults, they are often drawn to controlling partners, unconsciously replicating the patterns established in childhood, seeking familiarity even at the cost of their emotional freedom. Paradoxically, these sons tend to present an outward image of being good, obedient, and well-behaved, masking the inner turmoil they endure. This external compliance conceals deep feelings of entrapment and silencing, as their true emotions and desires remain suppressed to maintain the fragile peace within the mother-son relationship. The inner conflict for these sons is acute and persistent. They desire freedom and self-expression, but simultaneously fear hurting their mother or betraying the love they depend on. This tension creates a psychological bind. The need to break away clashes with the guilt and anxiety of doing so, often leading to a lifetime struggle to balance personal growth with loyalty to the maternal figure. Understanding this dynamic is crucial for helping these individuals reclaim their emotional autonomy and develop healthier relationships with themselves and others. The silent epidemic, societal taboo, and cultural reinforcement. The emotional wounds inflicted by difficult or damaging mother-child relationships often remain invisible, hidden beneath layers of societal expectation and cultural norms. Motherhood is widely glorified as sacred and selfless, making it almost unthinkable to question or criticize a mother without inviting judgment. This idealization creates a powerful taboo around acknowledging any harm caused by mothers, compelling individuals to suppress feelings of anger, hurt, or resentment. Society's insistence that children should honor their mother functions as a form of emotional censorship, discouraging honest recognition of abuse or neglect and fostering silence around these wounds. Within this framework, the mama's boy stereotype emerges, not simply as a light-hearted joke, but as a reflection of genuine psychological struggles. The term often ridicules men perceived as overly attached or dependent on their mothers, revealing underlying cultural discomfort with unhealthy mother-child dynamics. This stereotype points to how society conflates dependence with loyalty and control with care. A child's inability to emotionally detach from a controlling or manipulative mother is frequently misinterpreted as devotion, masking the emotional damage beneath. This confusion makes it difficult for individuals to recognize their experience as problematic or abusive, perpetuating cycles of dysfunction. Cultural narratives further entrench these patterns by normalizing controlling behaviors as acts of love and dependence as a virtue rather than a symptom of unresolved emotional needs. As a result, this dynamic does not only affect the mother-child bond, but also infiltrates other institutions and relationships. Patterns of control and emotional suppression often echo through marriages, friendships, and even workplace hierarchies, illustrating how early relational wounds shape broader social interactions. The cultural reinforcement of these unhealthy dynamics ensures that the cycle continues across generations, as children grow up internalizing the message that love requires sacrifice and silence. Ultimately, this silent epidemic remains largely unspoken because it challenges the foundational myths of motherhood and family. Breaking this taboo demands not only personal courage, but also a cultural shift that allows space for acknowledging the complexity of mother-child relationships, recognizing harm without dishonoring love, real-world signs and long-term effects. Adult men affected by the lingering impact of the devouring mother dynamic often display recognizable signs that ripple through various aspects of their lives. One of the most common manifestations is chronic indecision, a persistent inability to make choices, even in seemingly straightforward situations. This indecision is frequently coupled with emotional paralysis, where feelings become so overwhelming or suppressed that genuine emotional expression feels impossible. This paralysis often leads to difficulty committing, whether in personal relationships, career decisions, or life goals. In romantic relationships, these men may unconsciously repeat destructive patterns by seeking partners who mirror the devouring mother dynamic. This unconscious reenactment traps them in cycles of control, smothering, or emotional enmeshment, perpetuating a familiar but unhealthy dynamic. The comfort of the familiar paradoxically hinders growth and healing, making it challenging to break free. Emotional repression is another hallmark sign. Because expressing feelings was often discouraged or met with criticism during formative years, these men tend to bottle up emotions. This repression can erupt in sudden anger outbursts, moments of deep emotional breakdown, or, alternatively, withdrawal and isolation. These emotional extremes are often misunderstood by others and can further strain relationships. The invisible chains of this dynamic extend beyond personal relationships into career and social life. Men may find themselves stuck in jobs that don't fulfill them, plagued by self-doubt or fear of failure, which limits their professional growth. Friendships might feel shallow or fraught with miscommunication, as the inability to express vulnerability creates barriers to true connection. At the core lies a diminished sense of self-worth, making it difficult to pursue passions or believe in one's own potential. Ultimately, the cost is a life that feels off, a sense of being trapped in a loop of self-sabotage and unfulfilled promise. Despite external success or appearances, these men wrestle with an internal disconnect, yearning for freedom from the patterns that confine them. Healing begins with awareness, but without intervention, the long-term effects can shadow their entire adult life, leaving a profound impact on happiness and fulfillment. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow refers to the hidden, unconscious parts of the psyche, those traits, feelings, and impulses that we repress or deny because they conflict with our conscious self-image or societal expectations. The shadow often holds uncomfortable truths about ourselves, including vulnerability, anger, dependency, or shame. Yet, Jung emphasized that true psychological growth requires confronting and integrating these shadow aspects rather than ignoring or projecting them onto others. In the context of family dynamics, one such shadow pattern is the devouring mother, a figure whose overbearing, controlling love stifles autonomy and individuality. Recognizing and naming this dynamic is essential to breaking free from its grip. This process is not about blaming mothers or vilifying their intentions. Rather, it is about clearly seeing the patterns that have shaped one's emotional life. Naming the devouring mother dynamic brings it from the shadows into awareness, enabling individuals to disentangle their sense of self from enmeshed loyalties and emotional dependencies. This act of recognition is a crucial step toward individuation, Jung's term for the psychological journey toward becoming a whole and autonomous self. By identifying the devouring mother's influence, one gains the clarity needed to set boundaries and reclaim personal agency. It frees the individual from unconscious guilt and misplaced loyalty that often keep them trapped in unhealthy emotional bonds. However, this liberation demands great courage. Facing the guilt tied to perceived disloyalty or rebellion against a maternal figure can be profoundly painful. It requires steadfastness, not to surrender one's growth or authenticity in order to appease emotional expectations. The process involves holding space for compassion toward both oneself and the mother, while prioritizing psychological freedom. Ultimately, Jung's insight teaches that naming the shadow, whether in the form of the devouring mother or other unconscious forces, is the path to reclaiming autonomy and psychological liberation. It allows one to step out of entanglement, heal old wounds, and embrace a more conscious, self-directed life. Path to healing and individuation. Healing and individuation begin with practical steps that nurture the self's growth beyond old wounds and patterns. Therapy offers a structured space to explore deep-seated emotions and unconscious influences, guiding individuals toward greater self-awareness. Alongside therapy, setting healthy boundaries becomes essential. Learning to say no protects one's emotional energy and fosters respect from others. This boundary setting is not about building walls, but about defining one's limits with clarity and kindness. Emotional awareness is another crucial pillar. Recognizing, naming, and sitting with feelings, whether discomfort, anger, or sadness, creates a bridge between pain and understanding. Paired with self-compassion, this awareness softens the harsh inner critic, allowing one to treat oneself with the same kindness once reserved for others. Through these steps, the journey toward individuation unfolds as a gentle yet powerful reclaiming of one's voice. Finding this voice, authentically expressing needs and desires, means breaking free from the compulsions to please or conform ingrained by past dynamics. Learning to say no is an act of courage and love, opening space for genuine growth beyond familiar but limiting patterns. It is in this freedom that true transformation begins. Healing the original wound not only reshapes the relationship with oneself, but also ripples outward, transforming connections with others. As self-understanding deepens, relationships become less about reenacting old dramas and more about genuine presence and mutual respect. This transformation fosters healthier bonds grounded in honesty and empathy, Importantly, breaking free from dysfunctional patterns is not an act of betrayal, but the truest form of love, both to oneself and to those around us. Embracing individuation honors the complexity of mother-child love, acknowledging its beauty and its shadows without denial or resentment. It invites a fuller, more compassionate embrace of the whole story, allowing both pain and love to coexist as part of the path toward wholeness. The Devouring Mother archetype represents a shadow form of love, one that can imprison rather than nurture. This powerful but often hidden force entangles individuals in patterns of dependency, stifling growth and emotional freedom. Yet, by naming and recognizing this archetype, we begin to break the chains it forges. Awareness brings liberation, opening the path toward healing and transformation. Hope lies in the process of individuation, the courageous journey of reclaiming one's authentic self beyond inherited patterns. Through this journey, emotional independence becomes possible, allowing us to embrace love that supports rather than confines. Healing is not only attainable but essential to living a fuller, freer life. As you reflect on this, consider, what if the love that held you back was also the key to setting you free? This question invites us to explore the complex interplay of love and control within our own lives and encourages a deeper understanding of freedom's roots. I invite you now to reflect on your own story. Recognize where limiting bonds may exist, seek support if needed, and take steps to reclaim your emotional independence. In doing so, you honor the transformative power of love, not as a cage, but as a bridge to true liberation.